Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. I'm sitting today with Noelle London, who we're really, really excited to have on the show. Noelle, why don't you give the audience just who you are and what you do and why you're here?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having us. So my name is Noelle London. I'm the founder and CEO of Illoominus, like Illuminate Us. We're based out of Atlanta. Couple-year-old company. Really excited to have Team Ignite in the boat with us and on the journey with us. But a little bit more about what we do. We are a turnkey people insights platform that essentially allows organizations to learn across their systems that don't talk to each other and across companies to get better insights on how to become a people first organization.
Got it. And why is that important? Why now? Doesn't that exist already in the world?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we've consistently seen is that I think organizations and the very best organizations, we say they're people first, but it's organizations that understand that investing in their people is investing in their business and is really the competitive differentiator of their business. For those organizations to be able to think strategically and dynamically about how to best support their people, um, they're really not set up for success today. I mean, a lot of organizations have unfortunately, thought of HR as administrative and kind of an afterthought. And so what we've seen is that leaders oftentimes don't have access to the tools and resources to help them think strategically. We're finding even if you've got a really nice HR system for your employee data, you're still pulling that data into spreadsheets oftentimes. You're using 12 different systems that aren't talking to each other. So it's really a headache. And what we've done is help to create a workflow tool so that those leaders can, not have to think about data munging and think about spreadsheets and more have the data there, be able to look at in a way where they can think more strategically about how to serve their employees and in turn how to serve their business.
So immediately my investor brain is trying to think of an analogy, like it's Uber for
Yeah.
cats. How would you describe that? Like what is the one line analogy?
Yeah. You're
It's
not
like
going to
Tableau
like,
for people.
well, it's turnkey, but I think
Yeah.
I think that it's like almost like an amplitude for people or a supply chain ERP type of solution for people leaders. I think that's exactly when I was at Accenture prior to starting Illuminus and in my last role. I think that's kind of the thing in the market signal that I kept seeing is that every other part of the enterprise and every other department had these tools of we've got a lot of data we're bringing into one place. I'm a chief procurement officer and need to understand my supply chain. I'm a CMO and I need cross channel learnings. Every other leader was getting those types of investments in technology to look at the whole picture. And it felt like when I was looking at the landscape map of all the startup logos, because I was managing those partnerships with HR tech companies, when I was looking at that, it was like, hey, this map is made up of point solutions. It's pieces of the puzzle, but that HR leader still doesn't have the opportunity to really pull that all of those tools that they need to do their job, pull all of those tools into one place to actually understand, hey, how do those things relate to each other? Like when I am hiring someone into the organization, do I ever actually learn which sources of candidates stay longer within the organization? Do I even have that visibility? The answer was no. And so that's really the problem that we set out to solve.
So, tell me about your journey. I mean, how did you get to this place where you're like, okay, I see a gap in the market and I need to go build a company to solve this problem. Kind of give me the early history of Noel.
Yeah. I think that I was always one of those entrepreneurs that didn't really know that I was an entrepreneur. I didn't have the vocabulary for it until later in life. It's funny, like started a jewelry company when I was in high school.
This is Beads by Noelle. I have it in my notes
Yeah,
here.
part of the by Noelle family of brands. Beads by Noelle. Yeah, it's so embarrassing. But no, I mean, it was one of those things where I needed to have holiday presents, didn't have a lot of money, was a teenager, bought a bunch of beads, taught myself how to make jewelry. I don't think that the clasps even were like working and connecting to each other, like beads were growing everywhere. And I convinced a friend's mother and then that's kind of how it got started. And, did that for fun money when I was in college, up until when I left college. My first job out of college was actually as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Wow.
I thought I was going to be going to Africa and digging latrines. And I thought that was going to be my job for 2 years. And I was sent down to Nicaragua for 2.5 years to go and teach entrepreneurship. And
Oh, wow.
it was kind of this thing where it was a different time for Peace Corps, but it was the time of Peace Corps when you would sign up and say, I will go anywhere in the world for 27 months. I'll do anything that you tell me to do. And I'll leave at any point. And so I got the letter in the mail that said I was going to Nicaragua and I was going to be teaching entrepreneurship. And the first thing I did was say, well, what is entrepreneurship? And so I didn't know what it meant. I had my cousin sending me binders from college of like, this is what entrepreneurship is. And went down and
So they told you to teach this, but they didn't tell you how or give you any materials. So they're like, figure it out.
We actually did. So what was interesting is in Nicaragua, they had just passed legislation that every high school actually had to teach entrepreneurship in the high schools. And so they had a new curriculum for entrepreneurship. And it was like, how like a business plan was like, how do you make beans and rice? And that was like how you would teach that in the high school. But what we were essentially doing is teaching teachers how to teach entrepreneurship in the high school. So training the teacher kind of a model.
Oh, okay.
And
was that your college degree? I mean, what was your college degree?
Economics.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Economics, which building a startup's all about trade-offs and decision making. So that's essentially kind of exactly what economics is. But so yeah, it was economics and Latin American studies, but went down to Nicaragua, learned really quickly that startups was all about, I was working with female founders. These female founders were really creative problem solvers within their communities. They really understood challenges and were coming up with creative solutions. And for somebody who, has my analytical brain, economics brain, my mother comes from a creative family of artists, like have this creative side to me as well. I thought that creative problem solving was really powerful. And, I think I very early on working with these female founders in Nicaragua was like, I want to be one of those. And I'm going to be one of those. And so in terms of my journey,
right? I mean, watching,
and knowing that, I mean, it is, I think that's kind of sometimes what you hear a lot of entrepreneurs say is that you don't necessarily know that this is a path. You don't necessarily know that this is an option. It's not in the like, I want to be a firefighter when I grow up, like list of options oftentimes, at least when I was growing up, it didn't feel that way. So yeah, it was completely inspiring, fell in love with entrepreneurship. And so what I did knew I wanted to be one. What I did for the next over a decade is put myself in and around startups because I knew that I wanted to learn as much as possible about how you build great companies. I also think that there's something really special about the currency of entrepreneurship of like, I help you, you help me. And I think that that's something that is really unique about this industry in particular. And so helped a lot of people, learned a lot along the way. always getting myself ready for, hey, what's next? And when am I going to take that plunge? I think I carved for myself the niche around corporate innovation, because I felt like, in B2B software, being able to see those market signals, being able to see what industries were going to be asking for 5 years out.
Yeah, right.
That was really that opportunity to learn about, hey, here's some big gaps that I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to go and try and solve.
So you get back to the U.S. from the Peace Corps
Yeah.
27 months later, and then what?
Well, I started graduate school 2 weeks later.
Oh wow.
I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that in retrospect, but went to University of Texas at Austin, went to the policy school there. I went to the policy school, spent half my time in the business school, half my time in the policy school. Every time I would go over to the business school, they would say, you seem like somebody that should be in the policy school. Every time I would go to the policy school, they'd say, you should seem like somebody that should be in the business school. So I didn't really know like how I didn't really fit in either one. So I ended up spending some time creating a fellowship, kind of studying the intersection between policy. Hey, let me understand big problems that are really challenging to go
Yeah.
solve, the hard ones. Let me go and try and understand those hard problems. But I also want to use business as a way to solve for those problems. And so spent time back and forth. And I'm glad that I think a lot of business schools, policy schools are now working a little bit better together, understanding that there's a lot of crossover there.
Right. Because I mean, a lot of the problems stem from poverty, right? And so, like, if you can go do the economic development, that will inform the development of these policies.
Yeah. And it's
I said
like,
that terribly.
no, essentially, like what policy is policy is coming in
Yeah.
because there are problems that the market is not naturally solving for.
Mm.
And so you need some sort of intervention or some sort of program or some sort of initiative to support, like, hey, we've got to problem solve. Business is another way to problem solve. And I think for myself, like, that is what is really motivating to me as an entrepreneur, is this idea of problem solving. And I care about solving really big challenges. It'd probably be easier if I didn't try and go for such of the hard ones. But yeah,
like people analytics, right? That's a thorny, hard area.
Yeah.
So you graduate and then you start work in economic development. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I actually, while I was in graduate school, I did quite a bit of research on international entrepreneurial ecosystems. So it was more, hey, at the time, everybody, like a lot of countries were saying, we're going to build the Silicon Valley of X country. And so I spent a lot of time. I wrote my master's thesis actually on Ecuador's entrepreneurial policies. And I think more than anything, saying, if you want to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem, you should really start with your strengths as opposed to kind of picking up a model that might not necessarily work for your local context. Loved doing that kind of work. So that was, economic development focused. But realized if I wanted to start a company, I needed to go and work at a startup and really understand what that was like. So I actually left graduate school to go up to help launch a startup incubator that was focused on highly regulated industries. And so helped to expand that incubator into a new location in, expanding that community. Essentially what we were doing was providing training for entrepreneurs, education, access to customers, access to capital. So help them to build that program. And then ultimately that was probably like the 2015, 2016 timeframe. And I think a lot of corporates at that time were trying to understand how to start better working with startups through these incubator programs. So
Yeah.
I helped that incubator to build some of their corporate innovation programming. Essentially, how could we help to bridge the gap between those startups that wanted to work with corporates and corporates that wanted to work with startups, and neither of them really knew how to work with each other. And
Mm,
so, what we did is we actually built a program for Marriott while I was there that was a travel tech incubator. Travel tech was really big. At
mm,
that time, there was a lot of funding going into the space.
right.
And so essentially, what we were doing was helping to source startups and get startups ready to actually pilot with Marriott. Fun project and fun fact coming out of that is it led to the homes and villas concept, which was like the Airbnb like competitor for Marriott. So that was actually launched out of that program. So
Oh,
that kind of got my start into the corporate innovation space and really spending some good time there.
nice. So let me ask you this. Are entrepreneurs born or are they made? Or is it something in between?
I think it's something in between.
Because
I think it's something
you
in between.
look at your own background, right? And you're naturally doing this entrepreneurship as a teenager, and then you became an entrepreneur as an adult. And I wonder, like, can anybody do it, or are there just in certain inherent characteristics, or just some people are just meant to, be a bureaucrat at the government, or work at the software factory, and they're just not cut from that cloth of being a founder.
Yeah. I think everybody wants different things. And I think that the
Mm,
entrepreneurial path is probably for most individuals, like probably not the right thing, nor is it something that a lot of people would even find appealing.
right.
For myself, it's like I don't know how I don't do this from now on.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
you've
just
done this directly, hands on. I mean, what have you seen? What do you when you were working? Because you probably worked with dozens, if not hundreds, of people on this, hundreds and
hundreds of
hundreds,
starts. So, yep.
probably as many as me, right? As an investor. So, like, what are some of those characteristics when you see it in someone? You're like, ah, this person's going to succeed as a founder.
Resilience.
Mm,
Resilience. And when you say I think it's a mixture of both of like, are you born a founder or do you find this over time?
so it's the grit.
I think it's the grit.
Yeah.
It's the perseverance. I mean, I even joke like being a Peace Corps volunteer was one of the best like training grounds for being a founder because it's like the bus would leave me every single day to get to work and I still had to find a way to get to work. It's like, hitchhiking on motorcycles, like you just
Yeah.
the cards every single day were stacked against me
Yeah. So
and
as
you
you're kind of
still
designing
find a
these,
way.
yeah. So as you're designing these programs and working with these hundreds of folks, like how do you screen for that? How do you spot that? I'm curious as an investor. I think I have
Yeah.
some ideas, but like,
I think it's
yeah,
resilience. I think it's like, have
yeah,
you been in situations where like every single card is stacked against you and you still find a way and you still find a ways to succeed in that? I also think mindset of, like, does this person still find joy going
yeah,
through that process, even when it is that hard?
yeah,
Because you've got to have it. I mean, people do that differently and joy looks different to different people, but like having a sense of humor about it is something that's like important because and it's also like building a company, being a founder. It's not like it's something that, you're not exiting in like this is the long haul. This is a marathon. So I think also that, the ability to know yourself enough to like know how to take care of yourself through that journey is
yeah.
so important as well. But I
So
think
what kind of questions would
perseverance,
you ask?
grit,
Like you're
resilience.
interviewing people, put your investor VC hat on, or you're running this government program that you know creates entrepreneurs coming out of high school or college or something. What kind of questions are you asking these people to kind of test for this grit? This persistence.
You said the thing earlier about being a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I was a bureaucrat
So was I.
working
Yeah,
working
we've
in
all done it.
economic development,
Yeah.
but that was one of the hardest jobs because I was in charge of innovation within government. And what that meant is that it was like you want to build a program, everyone's telling you no. The legal department closes their blinds every time they see you walking down the hallway. But like you're still showing up with like, I was like, you're telling me that I can't email files. Cool. I will drive to your office every single day with manila folders of these students' like records. And I'm showing up and like, I'm going to knock on the door and like, we're going to make this thing happen. So
Like,
I don't
yeah,
think it's
pushing on
just
rope.
about, yeah, I don't think it's just about like the job of like, are you in the software factory? I think it's like knowing like, and it's not about the logo on a resume. It's like, tell me about the hardest job, like the biggest thing that you are proud to have accomplished when
Yeah.
all of the cards were stacked against you. And tell me the stories of like how you got that thing done. Because it's
Yeah.
one thing to like, you know, work at a company where it's like, it has a culture of like, you know, things get done and it's easy to innovate versus like an entrepreneur, you're being told no all day, every single day. Tell me about that job when you were told no all day, every single day, but you like still got it done. I
Yeah.
think that's far more, I know I'm biased, but I think that's far more interesting.
Love it. Love it. Um, okay. So you're doing this economic development. And then you somehow get, so it's you're working at Accenture with Marriott. And then tell me what happens next.
So the path was, I was up working actually at the incubator with Marriott, but I was actually working with Accenture when I was working at the incubator. So this is kind of prior to Accenture doing their own ventures work in house. That startup was kind of at a crossroads of, are we a community? Are we a software platform? I had the opportunity to come down to Atlanta from DC to lead the economic development work for startups for Atlanta. So essentially, we were recruiting startups that wanted to move their HQs to Atlanta, do international expansion, but then also our existing startups building programs for them so that they could connect with local talent, you know, investors, because there's a dearth of capital in the Southeast. And then also customers. So a lot of those corporate innovation offices that wanted to better work with startups, we were helping to facilitate that connection. So I was at the city. Accenture was launching a ventures team. And so essentially that work that we had been doing outsourced to identify startups to partner with Accenture, they wanted to bring in house and they wanted to launch that team. And so they brought me in to Accenture to launch the South Market unit, which essentially meant that we were standing up the function where we could both invest in enterprise technology companies. But then our unique approach was especially those companies that are starting to think about channels or starting to think about scale. Accenture is a fantastic scale partner for the right
Yeah.
companies. And so what we were doing was actually investing in those companies, wrapping Accenture services around those companies, like change management, strategy work. And then what we were doing was creating that unique joint go-to-market value proposition so that essentially it was like Accenture plus Beamery or Skyhive, which were a couple of the HR companies we worked with. We would wrap our services around them and then take them into our Fortune 2000 customers. So it was both like we were the scale partner for those startups.
We call
but
that
we were
Microsoft. I think we'd call that a consulting partner or an SI, systems integrator.
Yeah. So we were essentially becoming that because we had partnerships with our clients already. They were looking for unique technologies that were highly differentiated. And so we were able to bring those companies to our clients. And essentially, what we were doing there on the ventures team was startup enterprise sales. And so that's what my role was when I was there.
startup enterprise sales, meaning selling these services to startups, or the other way around, selling the startup platforms to big companies?
Yeah, actually selling those startup enterprise platforms to big companies. So like a good example would be, I mean, and this is not it's not a current partnership, but I'm just saying to illustrate it. For example, if an Accenture client would have been on large systems like a Workday system, for example, but they were struggling to bring that Workday data together with their employee engagement survey so that they could have broader visibility into the employee journey. What might have happened is, hey, we actually have Illoominus as a partner in our toolkit. Do you want to leverage Illoominus so that you don't necessarily have to figure out people analytics on your own?
Right.
That type of thing.
Which companies would Accenture work with? Like, what was the kind of the bar that they were kind of looking for startups? Was there a round of funding? Was it a certain ARR?
Yeah, I think when you do corporate, I guess the core of corporate innovation is like it should constantly be evolving, right? Based on the strategy. And I think that corporate innovation teams like you're continuously adapting and evolving to what the market is. While I was at it, I think that there's like different stages. Accenture is an 800,000 person company. It's massive. And
Yeah.
so typically what I saw was most helpful is those companies that were probably around like that series B stage where they have product market fit, they've got strong credentials in the market. So it's less of Accenture pushing new technology into customers and clients. It's more, hey, this technology is pretty well established in the market. Now those companies really need help around scale and growth. And at that point, those companies like can afford a dedicated channel partnership
Right.
person. And so it's more effective. I think, we're obviously we're a very early stage company. So we're not the right fit right now just because the like 800,000 person machine of Accenture, like
Yeah.
I think a small company doesn't have the
Right.
time to even be able to effectively dedicate. But those companies that, hey, you've got product market fit, you got those credentials, you're really thinking about how do we now scale through channels. That's
Yeah.
a really interesting place for that type of partnership to start thinking about how do we expand and not have to spend as much of our own resources on that enterprise sales cycle.
Yeah. And how do you think about that go to market as a enterprise software company? Scaling up. When do you open a channel? You said Series B from the Accenture standpoint, but from your standpoint, when do you think is the right time?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's something that we've experimented with of working with those consulting partners that, we worked with smaller boutique consultants that they've got an established client base. They don't have the data and the technology figured out. Is that an opportunity for us to go in and partner? I think that still as an early stage company, we're still continuously experimenting without putting a lot of resources there quite yet, just because what's so important for us right now is new customers, new contracts, speeding up the sales cycle. And one thing that I think, I've learned along the way is you got to have partners that have the same sales cycle as you. And
Mm,
oftentimes consultants are going to be thinking about, a couple years out. They're thinking about, like building up their client base. But we as a software company need to be thinking about those 60, 90-day sales
right.
cycles.
Yeah.
And so that's something where I think we've experimented without putting resources there. I also think that over time, we're in a really interesting place and there's really interesting dynamics within the HR technology space where, you have some companies that are trying to bundle everything into one solution. And then you've got all these point solutions that I think that we haven't partnered yet because we want to be mindful of like who's the right partner for us. But as those point solutions are potentially losing market share to the bigger players. I think that there's a really interesting play for us to partner with those kinds of companies so that we can still provide that visibility cross tools that only one of the larger players would be able to do today.
So walk me through the inception. So you're working with these startups and Marriott, Accenture, and what was the aha moment? Like, oh, there's this gap. I see it.
Yeah. Well, I think that we initially, I think that market signal of, hey, there are a lot of point solutions and there's a real lack of visibility. I think that that was kind of coming into play. I think that we noticed it in particular with a dedicated use case around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was at Accenture during 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, and was sitting in, a DEI council. And what I was seeing is that, I was seeing a lot of other companies ourselves trying to figure out what should our response be, what should we do, and starting with strategies, but not necessarily starting with the data. And I was seeing, we wouldn't really do that in any other decision and any other strategy. Why are we doing that in this particular case? And I started having clients coming to me and asking me for help around accountability. And I honestly did not have anything to give them in my toolkit.
Mm.
I was things where we were getting the, hey, my CEO put out a press release. We just did the numbers and we realized like we have to, hire these numbers we are unable to meet these goals that we have put out publicly. And that was a really interesting moment of, hey, we have these like goals that have time bound, they're numbers. We've never seen the influx of thousands of these types of commitments at one time.
Mm.
Is this the opportunity where, like it's the saying, your culture is what you measure? Like, is this our opportunity to actually help organizations to measure this and to meet these goals? So it was really like a timing piece and seeing that, the solutions didn't really exist in the market. I think so. We initially went to market with this dedicated use case around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, can we create the turnkey solution that allows you to track and measure your goals and help you to actually understand ways and levers that you have to meet those goals? I think that what we continue to learn over time through our existing customers that were using the tool is that this same problem that we went to solve in DEI around lack of visibility across the entire employee journey, like people were running at hiring for underrepresented talent, but weren't necessarily focused on that growth into leadership of underrepresented talent. And that's really what we set out to solve. I think that what we realized over time is that it it's a much larger problem of lack of visibility of the entire employee journey. And so that's where we realize, hey, we've already built a solution that touches all of this data. Our customers are now coming to us and asking us for help around overall reporting of HR. We've got a solution that we know we can go and solve for this with.
So that's the inception of the idea and the need, and then walk me through those first, few months. What was that like, and kind of what steps were taken to start this journey?
Wow, those first couple of months. I mean, it's the
It's kind of scary, right? Because you got this nice cushy corporate gig going, and now entrepreneur bells are going off, and you're like, oh, yeah. Walk me through that kind of inception, because that's always this like a scary moment.
It was such a. I mean, I use that analogy regularly. It's like the Wile E. Coyote. You're just like running, and then all of a sudden you look down, and that was like, I think the moment when I had great leaders that were super supportive of me and my growth at Accenture, and opportunities being presented to me of continuing to grow within the firm. And here I am just saying, and I'm quitting my job now. And everyone was like, what in the
What?
world?
Yeah.
But
You're
at
on
this,
track to be partner and you're
e-
on track to do this. And
and
it's
I
kind of
said,
scary, right?
yeah. And I, yeah, it was really scary when I told, because it was, you're just like running at building and not even, you're just running for so
Hmm.
long. And then when you tell your boss you're quitting, it's that was a real moment. I think for us it was, I knew there was I knew that if I didn't do this, I wouldn't. And
Mm.
I knew that this was my
So there
path.
was a
And
breaking point. There was, like when I started in venture, it was sort of, I did it on the side for years. And then it kind of coalesced into this, oh, I need to quit my day job and do this full time.
yeah.
So there was like this breaking point for me, but it sounds like for you, it wasn't gradual. It was kind of like, oh, I see this need. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to quit and go do it. And then did you raise money before you left? Or,
No.
yeah.
So no
Wow.
on all of that. I think for us, what I realize is we got a paying customer. And
Oh, you had the customer before you left. You're like, I know
well,
somebody who will buy this.
as soon as we landed the first customer, it was like we have to get a product in market in 6 weeks. And so that was the point when it was like, we've got a paying customer, we've got to get this product in
Wow.
market
And
in
how much was
six
that
weeks.
contract for? Like,
Let's go.
was that like a
Um,
5-figure kind of contract or?
it it was, yeah, it
Yeah.
was a 5-figure contract. It paid for our MVP.
Right.
And
So you
so
got a little bit of money. They signed a contract. They give you a little money to get started, and then you're like, and then who's on this journey with you?
yeah. A couple of things on that. So on the you asked if I raised money. I didn't. I didn't raise money. I bootstrapped us, and I bootstrapped my, I was had to have a certain amount in my savings account to cover myself for 18 months, just in case.
Yeah.
And I bootstrapped us and we built through customer revenue. The first funding that we took is we got into Techstars in, I guess, 4 months. No, like 6 months after we started, we got into Techstars, and that gave us a little bit of funding. But we have always just run so lean, and just super resourceful. Again, Peace Corps days. I think that really helped. Uh, so who's along for the journey with us?
Yeah. So it
I
sounded like you did it solo when you
so I
started.
was a solo found. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we explored. We explored like co-founder relationships.
Who's we?
Unfortunately,
You.
we as in I explored co-founder
Yeah. Yeah.
relationships. And unfortunately, I think that and I might get flack for this, but I think there's a lot of bad advice out there around the first thing you've got to do is find a co-founder. That's what I thought I needed to do. And I think especially for women and underrepresented founders, that can put a lot of people in precarious situations. I think if I had brought in a co-founder, which I explored, I think we would have built the wrong thing.
Mm.
I think like the way that we have had to build the company, and I'm a business minded founder. I'm a non-technical founder.
Right.
But I think I needed to explore for us, like not raising a lot of capital, we needed to build through customer revenue. And so I think I needed to find the commercial fit before starting to build the technology.
Right.
And so from the very beginning, we have just a fantastic team around us. So I'm a solo founder. But we've had a team that's been around since the beginning. We surrounded ourselves initially by a really great group of advisors that complemented our skill sets, had built technology, had sold companies, specialist in the research, had like run technology organizations. So we surrounded ourselves by those advisors, and then, built a bench of talent all around us, complementing our skill sets. So, like Courtney, for example, who leads our community of people leaders that we get together regularly to share best practices. Like, she was my leadership coach, and then now she's leading the community at Illoominus. Really great referrals over time for our head of technology, our designer, our advisor in data science. Josie has sold a company previously, PhD, came in as our head of data. Millie was a referral. So, we've just built this really strong team around us that really believes in what we're building and has kind of been along for this journey, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Tell me about some of the challenges. So you talked about some of the pitfalls of having a co-founder, potentially bringing in this new person who has a significant portion of the company because they're a co-founder. And you said previously that would have led to building the wrong thing. Why? What did you mean by that?
Because so much of the early days is about the problem that you think you're solving is never actually the problem. You have to pull the layers apart over and over, because on the surface it's like, hey, I care about this thing and I'm ready to dedicate my life every single day to it and I want to go and solve it. You find out along the way that the thing that you think is the thing is not the thing, and you've got to be ready to pivot quickly. Where,
Yeah,
we thought the first thing we thought we were going to do was like build a ton of integrations, and so we started building a ton of integrations. But then customers were coming to us and saying, like, I still want to give you CSVs and flat files until I get ready for the integration. So we would have put a lot of resources and
mm,
time when it was like we kind of just needed to get something out fast, like test it in the market. That I think that the person we would have brought on to be that technical co-founder, they may have had skill sets in certain areas, but it wasn't necessarily what we needed at the
right.
time. It might have, like, 2 years ago, been what we thought was the most important thing, which we thought it was APIs at the time, and it ended up being something that was very different. So, yeah, I think that that's actually
And,
given
and that
us
and
a
that's a
lot of,
pitfall,
like,
right? In startups, right? You have this really strong technical team that thinks they know what to build, and then they go build it. Nobody uses it,
yeah.
and
And
nobody
it's
wants to
like,
buy it.
and for us, it's like, just the flexibility of,
Yeah,
like, being able to scale up and scale down talent as we need it when we need it. I think, like, it was just like, as a co-founder, like, and this is, again, this is like a trade-off decision, but it's like, if you have a co-founder, every single decision is like a discussion, and like every single decision is a thing you've got to like be aligned on. That, like, we just needed to get something out. Like, we needed to
yeah,
listen to customers, we needed to get something out, we needed to learn and go back and iterate. And it was like, honestly, like, having to bring a person along for every single decision was like slowing down as opposed to like speeding up, as we were just in that learning process. And I don't think
right.
that, like, I think if it were, and that's just a signal of, like, I think it's like, what, like 70% of startups fail because of co-founder issues. Like,
Mm,
it just needs to be the right co-founder, and I think it won't slow you down if it's like the right co-founder, but
right.
unless it's right, um yeah, I think it's a really big risk.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's something, a rule of thumb. I usually like to have co-founders when I invest,
Yeah.
because the shutdowns I do have, it's exactly that. It was either a solo founder who just gave up, or it was two co-founders and one left, and then the other one was just like, "Oh, this is too hard by myself. I can't do it." Right? But you had
Yeah.
neither of those situations. You were solo from the beginning. What were some of the unique challenges? I mean, you talked a little bit about, hey, I had to build an amazing team and an advisory panel around me. But what are some of the unique challenges of being a solo founder?
I don't even know because I don't know otherwise. But
Yeah.
but at the
Yeah.
same time, I would say like I mean, my poor husband, like, after a while was like, yeah, I just like can't talk to you about this anymore. So
Yeah.
I think
I have that experience in venture. It's like,
yeah,
look, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
yeah, totally. It was like, I'm done. Like for today, like that's it. I'll talk to you about
Talk
it
about
again
anything
tomorrow.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's like knowing that I think it's like you just have to build in different ways. It like you do need a support system around you.
Yeah.
Other founders, I think like I probably lean more on other founders because I don't have a co-founder. Like all of those decisions, like every little thing that comes your way as a startup, it's like, what am I going to use for payroll? Like, how are you dealing with your 1099s? How are you doing, like, who's your accountant? Like, all of those little things that are just like decisions that you have to
Yeah.
make. Having a group of founders around you that are a couple of steps ahead can make that a whole lot easier to like speed you up. I also think things like, we did go through a Techstars program, like having a cohort of other founders around you, that can be kind of helpful instead of
Yeah.
having, the co-founder relationship. But I think knowing that it's like you being self-aware enough to know your limits. Like I'm a very good generalist. I can do a little bit of everything, but I also know when I've hit my limits where it's like I need to pull in somebody that really knows this space better than me. So building that like community around you, of people that you can go to with questions, of
Yeah.
people that round out your skill sets, is just so important.
How important was it in hindsight to go through Techstars? Like, was that, because you're giving away a good chunk of the equity really early. You got the standard 7% deal or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, right? In hindsight, was that completely worth it, or would you advise other solo founders or co-founders to do a program like Techstars?
It's a good question. What I will say is like it's interesting, especially in the early days. Like you're just searching for validation of like I need the customer, I need to make money, I need to, like get this person on my team. Like you're searching for validation, and in the early days, I think that there's something where you feel like those milestones are going to fix everything. Like I'm going to go through Techstars and I'm going to figure out go to market. Like you're not going to figure out go to market in 3 months. Like you're not going to get product market fit in 3 months. Like that's not possible. So I think that like there's this kind of fallacy of early stage startups. If I just get into Techstars, if I just raise money,
Yeah.
it's not going to solve all of your problems. Um, you're always going to have problems as a company. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So but I do think like it was really helpful to have the mentor network. So, got a lot through, those mentorship relationships. And I do think like, I am a female founder and it is hard. Like the data tells us it is harder to raise capital as a female founder. I'm also a
And
first
solo.
time and solo,
Yeah.
and I'm not a technical
And
founder,
you're not technical. Yeah. So
and
it's
I'm
like,
not technical.
whoa.
So like it's
Yeah.
a lot of cards stacked
Yeah.
against me. Thank you for investing in
Yeah.
this, Brian. But like I would say, like you have a lot of cards stacked against you. The credibility of going through Techstars and being a Techstars founder, I think that is helpful. It's a
Yeah.
signal. It's a signal to investors. It's a signal to potential customers. So I think like, you know, the positive of me being a solo founder is I also have more equity to play with
Right.
than I would have if I had a co-founder. So those kinds of decisions, that's a pro
Yeah.
of not having that partner.
Yeah. And I think I generally advise would be entrepreneurs who are on their first go around to definitely go through an accelerator.
Yeah,
I see a night and day difference with first time
you
founders.
do.
Oh yeah, ones that have gone through a program like YC or Techstars or 500 or whatever it
Yeah,
is, they're just night and day different.
yeah,
Now, if you've already obviously you've done a startup and you exited, or you don't have to do an accelerator again. But I think as a first time
yeah,
founder, I think it definitely gives you, like you said, the stamp of approval. It gives you a network of
yeah,
peers. gives you a network of potential customers and investors, et cetera, et cetera. There's
Yeah.
just so many benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much that you can continue to unlock. Like the thing is, you're not going to learn everything you need to know in 3
Yeah.
months, but being like, hey, that session on forecasting, like now I really want to go back to that, like you have that library of resources to go back to as you need it, which is really
Yeah.
great.
So what's next for Illoominus? What's the future hold?
Yeah. So we closed a pre-seed round in, I guess, July of this year. And so we are all in execution mode. What's really exciting is that we are launching Illoominus 2.0. So all the things that we've been learning alongside customers that we've been watching happening in the market. We are rolling out a new product year end, beginning of the year. So really excited about just how it places us really in a new category. And so all eyes are on executing and getting that product out right now. Which is really exciting. And then we also, so we launched, I mentioned Courtney earlier on our team, we launched a community of people leaders that we get together regularly to share best practices and to support each other. So we recently had the Pendo's chief people officer was on talking with us. James D. White, the former CEO of Jamba Juice, chair of the board of Honest Company, was on 2 weeks ago talking with the community as well.
Oh.
So we are gearing up for our rounds of events early next year. So really excited about just the calendar that's coming out and just the ways that we can continue to support these people leaders. We'll plan to do an activation at Transform in March, focused on people first cultures. So just really excited about those particular
Nice.
things that are coming out. And yeah. And what's next?
Exciting. So why don't we switch to rapid fire?
Okay.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
The best piece of advice that I ever received. I think probably I think somebody's saying you know your company better than anybody else does. You get a lot of advice as a founder, and you get a lot of advice just with people not necessarily knowing everything about your business. I think that it can be overwhelming sometimes when you have very well-intended supporters and champions around you, but just knowing like what to hold on to and what like you might want to come back to at a different time. I think that that's been helpful.
Love that. If you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh man, I know at least 2. I feel like John Lewis and Barack Obama, and just getting to like sit at the table with those 2 as they're talking to each other. I just want to be a fly on the wall and get to eat dinner with them.
And myself, who's John Lewis?
So John Lewis is recently passed away. He was actually, when we first moved to Atlanta, he was one of our representatives, but he's a very important civil rights leader and politician in Georgia, but has just had such a lasting impact on civil rights conversations overall.
Love that. Name a book that has significantly impacted your career or life.
Yeah, I read a book. This comes from that like international economic development perspective, but I read a book called Automating Inequality that was all about like unintended consequences of technologies that were originally set out to support poverty alleviation, and like the how sometimes those technologies actually end up doing the worst and doing worse work than they're meant to help. And so I think that really sits with me, especially as we're building technology that incorporates AI. We're building technology that impact sensitive information. And so from the very beginning of how we've built our product and how we continue to build our product, being mindful about unintended consequences that
Yeah.
technology can create.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
I really have, it's like you see colored pens and list. I think I read also an article about on productivity, like how we will never solve productivity because we inherently as humans like have to procrastinate. So I'm a list builder, and my calendar is color coded, and pretty much every single half
I do that
hour
on my calendar too. I have different colors for different kinds of events and things like that.
every half hour is accounted for.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
You do tasks on your calendar as well. It's
I
like I
don't
got to
do
do this
tasks,
thing.
but I actually just do time, like, so I see it. It's like time blocks. I just put it on there. Nothing fancy.
If you could instantly gain expertise in one subject or skill, what would it be? You plug into the matrix and learn kung fu.
I think it'd be really cool to be able to speak every language.
I love that. Yeah, being able to communicate and connect with people regardless of
In
language.
their
Yeah,
language. Yeah.
that would
I've
be.
never thought about that before.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, and thanks for your support of us and what we're building along the way. We're very fortunate to have you in the boat with us.
Thank you.